Writing in comics is not what the writer does. Writing in comics is what is delivered to you on the page. The artist is not an illustrator. The artist is a graphic designer in the service of narrative. His job is to transliterate the narrative, the literary nature of the script, which is more than a template, into a page and panels and a series of turn pages that are endowed with literary and narrative value. And that's a very subjective, very murky concept, but it is real. I started my career with no talent at all. My talent was, as I say, mostly mind rage and hunger. I was introduced to comics at the age of 4, the same year that the Comics Code Authority infantilized comic books and infantilized the audience. Up to that point, there was a possibility, potential, of comics becoming in the United States something more like what comics were like in Japan or France or Italy. But it was nipped in the bud by components of the Red Scare and by also parents who were unwilling to take responsibility for fucking up their kids' lives and wanted to blame other people, like comic book people, like comics. And when I got to know Joe Orlando, who was a rabbi at DC, who protected me from Carmen and Patina, because Carmen hated me because of my relationship with Chaykin. Joe talked at great length about how comic book artists in the 1950s, thanks to the Chicago Commission and Frederick Wortham and other things like that, were considered pornographers. And I am a pornographer. I'm perfectly happy being a pornographer, but it's a different world and a different time. And the difficulty of having respect for the work you do is personified by a guy named Johnny Craig. Johnny Craig was one of the great artists in DC who was browsing that comics from his wife because she was ashamed to be associated with someone who was working with her. And he became a clip artist for 20 years. Imagine the loss. That brilliant work, drawing pictures of refrigerators and clowns. But I love it, bullshit. It was sad. And I was lucky in that I came of age in a time when comics felt they were under death throes. I know it's impossible to convey to a contemporary audience the sensibilities that were rampant in the early 1970s. We believed we were the last generation of comic book artists. We believed that with the advent of personal computers, paper would disappear. That we would be an entirely digital culture. And that we would outgrow superhero comic books. Because superhero comic books were drawn by men our parents' age, or children that we'd outgrown. None of us, with very few exceptions, guys like Rich Buckler, arrived with anything like a skill set or a sensibility that was going to be available to Stan Lee, who was the ruler of the roost at that point. Because Marvel had superseded DC in its value. I couldn't imagine myself drawing a superhero comic book like Jack Kirby, which was not my way. And watching the other members of my contemporaries, some of them, move over so you're not in front of that guy. No, the guy just moved over. You're like the guy. Find the one empty seat in the fucking theater in front of one person. How dare you? What the fuck are you doing? Yeah. No, and no. I mean, come on. Be grateful. Yeah, sit down. I was going to fuck somebody else's life up. That's great. You missed all the good shit, by the way. I can just do this forever because I'm very comfortable with the sound of my own voice, and I'm also very comfortable with my opinions. And everything I'm saying, to a great extent, is some of it's information, a lot of it's knowledge, but a lot of it is also opinion. I'm very much the bridge between the generation that preceded mine and mine. There's a miniature generation of men, mostly men, born in the late 1930s, early 1940. Who guys like Chaykin, like Neil Adams, Roy Thomas, Tom Palmer, Ray Morrow, Flo Steinberg. But most of the guys were my parents' age, born in the 20s. And I'm the youngest in my cohort. The oldest was born in 45. And I was born in 50. And I grew up in a really, I had a shitty childhood. I was raised on welfare. I was born and raised in tenements in Brooklyn. So I have a real aversion to presumptions made about what my life was in growing up and coming into manhood in the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s. Like people whose understanding of the past is filtered through a stream of their own identity, which is just nonsense. I've said more than once publicly that every generation knows that what media says about that generation, one's own generation, is utter bullshit and lies. It's a simplification, it's a reductive set of ideas. But that same medium is taken at its word and at its face value, whatever it says about other generations. I have disabused Gil Kane of the notion in 1969 that my generation wasn't having sex instantly without any preamble, just because he believed we were just this like rampantly just postulate sexual level. I said, no, the courting process is different from yours, but we still have to work at it. I mean, I was much better looking when I was a younger man, and they kept marrying me for a reason. But I think Gil was both delighted to find that we weren't getting paid as much as he feared we were. But he was also disappointed to find that there wasn't the potential he might be able to join the club. And so my generation were I'm having the best time right now. I'm really having a good time. My generation was the last generation of comic book talent that read for entertainment and information, that were collegial, because we all lived together. We all lived in New York together. But as I said, I'm a bridge to that earlier generation. You guys are born on my parents' age, because I'm an old person. I was raised by old people, and I like old people. I liked them when I was younger, and I like them now. And I met Gil Kane when I was 13 years old, and through him I met everybody. I met all the old guys, and to a man, the ones that liked Gil, the ones that disliked Gil, the ones that they were friends with, they were all very bitter about their experience because they had been unprepared for what their lives developed into. Most of them got into comics because they were fans of the pulps, they were fans of the newspaper strips, and they had some skill set that could be a breadwinner in their families. They came in at the end of the Depression. In many cases, their parents weren't working. And they were the money people in the family. And most of them assumed it was a transitional experience, that we go on to something else. Many of them were driven out of the business in the early 50s. But a lot of the marginal talents had nowhere else to go. Henry also says in front of somebody, there's always somebody saying, you people, there were barns for whom been raised in instead of, I'm having fun at your expense. So I really admire and revere those old guys. I truly do. One of the reasons my generation, or at least I and my generation, have no bitterness about that sort of thing. You coming in, Brad?
For you, Howard, I'd go anywhere.
There you go. People like me despite myself. Go sit in front of somebody. It's really good. It's the thing to do today. So I try to keep that old ethos alive. And that's one of the things that informs Hey Kids Comics. There's a book I'm just about to finish, but finally should be out Wednesday. And the material is a fictional history of the comic book business. And I've often said that a lot of it didn't happen, but it's all true. So much of our experience in comics is anecdotal, and no one was there to record it. I mean, no one really ever hung anybody out of the window. That was just bullshit. Close the door. I don't want to see all these fucking cosplayers walking by annoying the fuck out of me. Did I say that out loud? I am an asshole. I can't deny it, but it's better than a creep. Right? Hold on a second. Let me lubricate this. By the way, any one of you can stop me at any time with a question. But you're all cowards, so you wouldn't. Yes, sir.
One of my favorite...
Louder and stand up-ish.
One of my favorite pieces of modern art is a page from a Flag 1 where Flag and Krieger are flying in to a war zone and stuff's going on. The thing I like about
I look at that page as an adult now and regret it.
I'm sorry, it's one of
No, but graphically there are things that are really wrong with the page. Please go on.
Anyway, but one of the things I liked about your Flag work was it wasn't 9 freaking panels every page. It was marvelous, close-ups, everything on everyone. And my question is, when did you first start getting away from that standard rectangle and square form?
That's a reasonable question.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
You son of a bitch.
I never did a grid. I was never a grid person except when it was imposed upon me. Comic books is an intrinsically conservative medium. It does not reward transgression. It does not reward transcendence. The first guy to really break it out was Jim Steranko. Much more than Neil. What's that?
I would say Al Williamson.
No. William, I'm sorry. I mean, I regard Williamson as a good draftsman, but I don't really care at all about Al Williamson's work. I just don't. It doesn't interest me in the least.
I'm just commenting on the...
No, who cares? I mean, Williamson was nowhere near the artist that said Woody was.
Oh.
I'm talking now, shut up. And Steranko was the guy. And the thing about Steranko's great gift was a brilliant synergizing of Jack Kirby and Bernard Krigstein. And the idea of taking two so completely diametrically opposed ideas and putting them together on a single page is absolutely brilliant. Whether it was an intellectual decision or an accidental stumble, it doesn't matter. Those Shield stories are all a synergy of Krigstein and Kirby. The multiple panels, the use of repetition, the structural dynamic of the page themselves. Steranko is an extraordinary graphic designer. He's a terrible draftsman, but he's a really good graphic designer. He doesn't have any idea about story. He's a terrible writer. But he can put together a page that has a genuine beauty that is subjective, but beauty nonetheless. And my job as an artist in comics is, and I consider myself a cartoonist, a writer and artist, that I have to do a page that is endowed with narrative value, made of panels that have narrative value, that are the size and shape they are for a reason, nothing arbitrary, and that everything must have a context in the story, in the narrative. The page you mentioned and other pages like them are about my inability to do interesting work in a 9-panel grid or 6-panel grid. And I began to understand the idea when I was driven away from comics by Jim Shooter, and I was away for 18 months, that there were ideas of pictures that could be applied to comic books that people hadn't noticed before. That you could use a map maker's technique. You could use the work of there's an artist named Richard Solomon, who was a graphic designer, designed the map of the New York subway system, the Paris Metro, and the London Underground, who in the mid-1980s did a series of books on travel books, redesigning and reinventing the concept of travel guides. They were called Access. And what he did was he did these exploded images of tourist sites. They were fascinating to me. He did this for hockey, football, and baseball as well, which I found fascinating. So I tried to use a lot of that stuff. And I took a lot of shit from guys like Alex Toth. Because Alex was deeply dogmatic. He believed in the grid. And I felt that the grid existed for a reason. You should use it, but you don't have to use it. That you could adjust the size and shape of the panel. And what ultimately evolved from that were a series of theories about how to tell a story visually. That I came to understand that many writers did not understand that the page itself was a piece of space which represented time. Space in comics represents time. The amount of space you endow to an image is roughly equivalent to the amount of time involved in the action depicted in that image. I further came to understand that most people in comic books did not know how to make pictures. That they could put four black lines around a shape and call it a picture, but that's not a picture. A picture has to be a contrived image. It's a wonderful book by the artist Robert Fawcett, who was a great illustrator in who died in '67, he worked from the late 1920s and 1960s, who never became a major popular person, who didn't have a kind of a bravura painting style like Rockwell or Leyendecker, but was a graphic man who described illustration as contrived imagery. And by contrivance, he did not mean, lie-ish, dishonest, but rather made and created. And when I did a seminar on Marvel for 8 years, twice a year. And one of the functions of behind convincing these people that time management was a necessary factor of actually having a career, and that it's no longer a fucking hobby, that once you start taking money from someone, you are no longer putting one over on the man, you are the man, you better quit fucking around. The other one is to understand that there are no arbitrary images, that where you place shapes, the way you choose to frame an image, is directly related to the narrative value of that picture. And that organization of space is the biological imperative of comic book making. When I look at a page of comics by someone who doesn't know what they're doing, I'm appalled by the fact that these people just have no clue about the fact that there's a language, there is a structural value, there is a syntax. Recently, over the past couple of years, as comics have become part of the lingua franca, everything, so they're suddenly hip in a peculiar and sideways sort of way. There seems to be this emergent theory that making comic books is on the same level and the same difficulty as par as reading comic books. And that you can wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to do a graphic novel just because, I can. And it's just nonsense. It's comparable to someone who's given a piano and doesn't bother with lessons because he knows it's literally just a box with things in them. They can make noise, you can